All right, everybody, welcome back to episode number 3 of the Stronger You Project. I'm sitting here with a friend of mine that I got to know over over Instagram, and I started to follow him just because I saw the things that he was doing. He was in kind of the same space that I'm in, so I wanted to connect with him more and bring him on the podcast. And his name is Rob Eastman. He's a highly sought after life coach, entrepreneur, nonprofit founder. He's a speaker, he's a wrestling coach, and a youth mentor, as well as an extreme athlete and father. His message resonates with schools, churches, masterminds, and corporations. His personal story of overcoming bullying, mental health struggles, suicidal ideation, and addiction is incredibly moving and powerful. Rob's real world experience helps develop both mindset and strategies for people to climb out of any situation and take their lives to the next level. He motivates people to change by overcoming fear, coping with tough life events, making healthy life choices, and discovering who they truly are. Warriors in the garden. Man, you are you are a diverse person. And when I looked at your Instagram, I really love that one part where it says straight talker. I really like that part. So, Rob, thank you for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I've had a wild last few weeks and prepping for my wedding and everything else. So just got back in country and I'm excited to be on your show.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming, and I'm super pumped to have you here. I see that you have a lot going on. With that wedding, you got a book coming out. We're gonna talk about that for sure. But when I read your profile, overcoming bullying, which probably, you know, led to some of your mental health struggles, I'm gonna guess, but I don't
Yeah.
wanna tell your story or, guess about what your story is. Why don't you tell, my listeners just about, how you became the life coach, the trainer that you are, how you came to own a
Came to own
gym
a gym
and,
and
you know, step into the man you are today.
awesome. Awesome. Again, thanks for having me on. So yeah, I'll give you some bits and pieces of my story, and I think the more people get into recovery or really dive in and do the work on their mental health, they find that we're quite a bit alike, the human race. That's the one thing we all share in common is struggle, and that's the one thing that we have the hardest time sharing with each other. So I think that's the been my war path once I got into recovery was helping other people know they're not alone and as I just hit 14 years in my recovery journey on September 1st. And looking back, it's like one of the biggest turning points for me was I was sitting in my last rehab and going over one of the steps, and I was complaining about like my ex-wife leaving or something, and this tattooed guy that was fresh out of prison, he's like, "Man, when did this first start?" And I was like, "Oh, she left me like 2 months ago." He's like, "No, when did you first start hating yourself?" And I was
Oh,
like, "Shit." And I started thinking, I'm like, kindergarten. Like I was the coolest dude in the house. My mom loved me, my brother loved me, everybody loved me. And then I got into school and it was like everybody made fun of me for having red hair or having big ears or not being able to sit still in class. So that was like my first monster were the bullies, were the teachers that would make fun of me and made it okay for the other students to make fun of me. And by the third grade, um, I'd gotten so sick of it that I just started fighting back. And that's when I had my first suicidal ideation. It was like kindergarten, I didn't understand why these kids were making fun of me. So I just kind of like developed those skills of being a people pleaser. So these guys would like me and these guys would like me. And then I'd get home, I'd be so tired from putting on a show and acting out of who I needed to be for these people to like me. And and I look back, I start, third grade not wanting to be around and not fitting in at our church and all of these different things where you're supposed to be loved and cared about. And when that man told me that in rehab, he's like, "When did you first start hating yourself?" I look at like if I were to go through all my adult fails, I'd be still doing it. It's like, how did that happen? How did that happen? It's like, man, I developed these skills as a little kid. I
oh,
put on whatever mask you needed me to be, pretended it was easier to lie than let people down. And once I started doing that and working my way back and kind of finding my path, if you will, it's like, I worked with adults for a really long time, and then I start wanting to work with youth, And then I found the two are the same thing. It's like you can help a kid or you can help an inner child and an adult. There's a lot of unhealed people running around, and it's not the things they're doing as an adult, it's the things that they didn't get figured out as a kid.
Mhm.
And once I started figuring all those out, you know, as I went through, the only thing I was ever good at was sports. So if it was school time, we have to get a 2.0. I don't know how you guys do grades over in your world, but you have to get a 2.0, and it's like I was like a 1.3 student, which is basically showing up, sign your name, and that's about it.
Mhm.
And then during soccer, or hockey, or basketball, or whatever season it was, I'd get a 2.0. I'm sure my mom did my homework during that time so I could play soccer or whatever. And it was just constant. I think I lived in constant survival mode from a very young age, which spiked my ADHD, and I don't even know if we used the word anxiety back in the 80s and 90s,
Mhm.
but the depression and things like that. And I grew up, we didn't have grandparents. I didn't even know what that was. And when I had my first attempt in the ninth grade, the cops brought me home, and my dad took me out in the garage, and he took the gun. The cops gave him the gun, and took it out in the garage and smashed it up with a sledgehammer. And he's like, "Do you know why you don't have grandparents?" And I was like, "No." And so he proceeded to tell me when he was younger, his dad drove his truck off of a bridge, and when about a year later, his mom ended up taking her life. And in that moment, I was like, "Man, I love my dad. I don't want to make my dad sad." Like, so that the option of ending my life that way kind of was removed. And coming from a spiritual back or religious background, we don't smoke, we don't drink, we don't have sex before you're married, all that type of stuff. And that was another. I'm like, man, I'm gonna gotta let my parents down, but I couldn't handle the emotional pain anymore. So that's when I hopped into doing drugs for the first time. And I'm sure everybody knows that that first deal, takes the pain away for a minute. And then when it wears off, the pain's still there, and you gotta smoke again and smoke again. And
Mhm.
rather than learning the life skills I needed to survive as a law-abiding citizen, I just kept adding more drugs to my system, and got really good at manipulation and getting what I needed. So that went on through high school and into college, and fast forward 20 years, and I went through multiple suicide attempts, spent 10 days in a coma, multiple overdoses, and coming out the other side with, two two sheets of charges in the courts and fines, and you burn down every relationship you ever had. And for me, it was like I have more opportunities than most. I came from a pretty prominent family, and we owned car dealerships, and in the political world and different things like that. I had more opportunity, but I also had more pressure, I guess you could say. And I just didn't know how to stand on my own 2 feet. And so when it came time to do so, it's pretty embarrassing. You let your family down, you let all these people down, and who you are when you're in your addiction, the things you do when you're in your addiction, then you look at that through sober eyes. It's pretty humbling. And I think that was the first time. My best friend, who's tattooed on my forearm, says my story isn't over. When I was 21, he threw me a 21st birthday party, and 11 days after that, he took his own life. And that was the first real, like, shot to my soul of, like, we talked to each other about everything. Like, was I too drunk or too high? Did he tell me he was going to do this and I just don't remember? Did I blow it off? And originally, he was one that, I knew he experienced depression like I did. I knew he struggled like I did. And in the very beginning of doing drugs and drinking, it took the pain away. And so, I introduced him to that, and ultimately that's what took his life. And so I held that pressure on my back forever. Like, am I the one that caused this still? And it just, that just compounds. You keep every little lie you tell, every person you cheat, every one thing you do, it's like you're just putting those things in this imaginary backpack of shame, and eventually, you either need to put it down or it's going to break you. And I think for me, it came to a head of both in 2009. Ended up, I've been married multiple times. My daughter's 7 months old with my second marriage, and my wife had just left me, and it just came to a point. I'm like, man, the world's gonna be better off without me. And I went up, told my parents I loved them, kissed my daughter, just telling, a few weeks prior to that, my wife had left. My dad had, I was forced to move out of my house, and I had to move back in with my parents. Couldn't keep a job. I had relapsed, obviously. And my dad had walked down and sat across from me and handed me a piece of paper, and he said, "Read it." And as I started reading this paper, he had sat up and wrote my obituary the night before. And he's like, "I know you're going to die, but I can't watch you do it in my house. So you got to get out." And that was a point where I was like, man, I have nothing left. And so the only way I could get back in the house was to see my daughter. And that was going to be the night I snuck in and stole a gun and went up in the mountains and was going to end my life, and had a pretty profound uh, divine intervention, if you will. And I'm going to save the full story for
Mhm.
the book, but it was enough that I couldn't deny what had just happened, and that was my sobriety birthday. The next day was that event happened on August 31st, 2009. And I drove myself straight to the hospital that night, checked into detox, and never looked back, knowing that if I were to ever go back, that I didn't have another run in me. So I spent every day from that point um, just digging into life, and I had three pretty major events happen within the first 9 months of my sobriety. You hear a lot of people with 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and then something happens. They break up with their girlfriend and they relapse. It's like, I don't, the time for me, it wasn't about the time. I got tested very early, and pretty much socked in the face by life. And that just made me, know that because you're sober doesn't mean things are going to get easier. Because you're sober, it's like the sobriety versus recovery mindset is such a, whether you fall off and you keep going, like if you're constantly trying to improve yours and those lives around you, good things happen. Like I have, I don't know, I'm sure you've looked on my Instagram and all that. I'm a little bit of an extremist.
Yeah, I saw some of the stuff that you do with the swing and stuff.
Yeah, so it's like for me, it's not that extreme, but when I look at other people, they're like, "Man, you live in my bucket list," and it's like, I have to learn. I learned that way better. It's like I ran 13 ultra marathons, not because I love running, but because when you're 25 miles into the mountains and you're broken down and you still have 25 miles to get out and nobody's coming to save you, you learn a little bit about yourself. And so through my journeys of that, it was like I came out. It was like I went from making like $35,000 a month. I owned a concrete company to working for a company for $10 an hour because money in the start of my recovery was a trigger for me. So I was like, I'm just going to go over here where I can show up to work and it's waiting for me and I can leave work and I don't have to worry about it again. And that's when I started training people for free in the park. And that was the only, I loved fitness. I couldn't afford a therapist, so I got a Pell Grant from our government and went back to study psychology at a college.
Oh, good for you.
I fell in love with psychology. I hate all the other. I didn't take any other classes. I just studied psychology. And the my counselors at the school are like, "You don't want a degree?" I'm like, "Nah, I just want to know why I'm so messed up." Looking at me like, "Okay." Like, so I just started taking everything I learned in class and then applying it into fitness and into life lessons at the school or wherever I was coaching people. And it was like I had this aha moment, this burning desire one day at work that God didn't put me on earth to be a marketer for a disaster cleanup company, and that helping people and helping them through fitness and psychology was kind of the burning bush for me. So I quit my job and I went all in, and 13, 14 years later, um, I'm a full gym owner and loving life. And it was a constant push of educating myself, getting every certification on, like, very early into fitness. I found that people came to me not for to learn how to do a back squat, but because their life sucked. They didn't like they hated themselves. Their wife thought they were fat, all these different things. And I was like, I need some psychology. I don't need to know how to do a push-up. So I started studying more psychology, like youth, mental health, first aid, and crisis planning for families, and peer support specialist that deals with every mental health um, diagnosis and how it affects addiction, and just like filling my own brain with things that people can't take from me, because the bank a few months prior to that had come and taken everything from me. And I just fell in love with being around people. And a lot of people go to AA and they get stuck in AA or CA or NA, right? Whatever it is. And for me, it's just like another tool. There's a lot of great things, but there's no one thing I don't think that will keep people happy and healthy forever. So I like to add to my process. Whether it be rock climbing or skydiving. I was a big fear facer at the start. I didn't want to have anything that could give me anxiety. That's why I started speaking too. I had to speak in front of a class. All I remember is my teacher like prompting me from the back, like, "Bro, are you okay?" I was like, boom. I was like, go out to my car. I'm just like, I am never doing that again. And that's that thing. That's what got me sick in the first place, like running from the things that are hard, running from what makes me feel uncomfortable. So I just started doing all those things, and I don't think I'm much different than many other people in recovery, maybe just a little more willing to take things head on at the start, or I guess was pretty forced to with
Mhm.
the circumstances that I had. But man, it's a beautiful, amazing experience. And I think probably the biggest thing for me was switching my mindset. And I don't know if you're like this or not, but when I got into recovery, I was like, look, if I can just make $40,000, have a car and a place, I'm good. I'll be happy for the rest of my life. And then I get there and I'm like, man, if I could just make 80, it's constantly like this destination. It's going to be this amazing experience. And you get there and it's just not that amazing. So once I swapped over to where if my life is going so good, I like to choose to call him God. That's God's way of being like, hey, you've done a good job. Take your boots off, get ready for the next summit. It's just a false summit after false summit after false summit. And so I just enjoy the journey. I slow it down, appreciate the moment, enjoy my family. I just got married, could enjoy my beautiful wife now
Mhm.
and time with my daughter. I'm a little farther down the road than you, but it's like I remember when my daughter was 2. It's like they learn a word and you're so excited, and just wait 6 months, she's gonna be brrr. They
Mhm.
go from 50 words to 2,000 words all in 6 months. It's crazy. And
Yeah.
you wanna protect him and you wanna keep him safe and you wanna like it's a scary place to be. And then you get down the road and you're like, "You know what? Those of us in recovery and in the mental health industry that actually do the work and get better, we got a PhD in what not to do. Our education almost cost us our life. Those that read about us cost them a couple $100,000. It's like they're so afraid of sharing that piece of them, that in fear of what people might say. It's like that's the missing piece to the puzzle. It's the only thing we as humans share in common is struggle. You don't like the same foods, you don't like the same teams, you don't like the same churches, you don't like the same music. It's like, I like to use the cast. When you broke your arm as a kid, you went in, you had all your friends sign it. It was a cool thing to do. But then you struggle with depression and you want to hide. It's that unseen thing, and for me, I want to make sure that we change the way that we view and talk about mental health and get the stigma away. And that's why I just did my last big project of writing my book, Warrior in the Garden. That was a scary, scary thing to do.
I bet, man. Well, couple things. I got a lot of notes here, but first I want to honor you and thank you for sharing that story with us, for going that deep and telling us how it started, where it went, and I just want to thank you for still being here. This world deserves you. It deserves your smile, deserves your energy, your passion, and I know you're helping a lot of people. And the cool thing is that I also see videos of you and your daughter. I see that you coach her, and that's something very special. And I'm very fortunate that I didn't remember 3 years of my kid's life, the first 3 years. I don't really remember that because I was in my addiction phase. But now I get to be in his life now, and I get to be a father again. But this time I get to be it with our daughter, who's 2 years. I get to be it sober.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate. But yeah, I just want to thank you for sharing that story with us. Wow, man, I'm happy that you're here.
Thank you.
Um,
Appreciate that. You
I
as
like
well.
I like the PhD, and knowing what not to do, because you know I resonate so much with what you're saying. And I wrote a book too, and I have so many people coming up to me and they're like, "Oh, I know what that feels like. I went through that too." And it took me so long to realize that we are not alone. That the only difference between guys like me and you is that we're sharing our story.
Yeah.
And when did you actually start to share your story? When did you say, you know what, I need to share this, I need to get it out into the world? Like, I know you started to do psychology and stuff like that, but when was the first time that you actually spoke?
Yeah. I was so a little background on me. My dad was we owned like a Jeep, Chrysler, Plymouth, Suzuki, like a bunch of dealerships, and but he was a school board president while I was going through school. So I was a shithead, man. And so but they were people were afraid to get me in trouble. Like our cop would come and take my keys at the first of a dance and give me a breathalyzer at the end. And if I was okay, he'd give me my keys back. I'd never really got the punishment that I should have. And so then he goes on to become a state senator and all these things. And he's setting laws and I'm breaking them in the same night. I'm making the news for the wrong reasons. And I really just blew up everything he did to try and do well for the community. And so when I got sober the first time in 2007, um, one of my high school teachers that I did not get along with asked me to come back and talk to his health class. And I remember going back and obviously going through rehab, we went to AA and I said a couple good things one time and a couple people came up and fed my ego and told me that they needed to hear that. So I thought I was the man, right? So I'm ready to speak. And I went into the school and I spoke and he had me come back a second day. And the first day there was like 30 kids. And then the second day there was like 150 kids in there. Because in my town, very religious and people don't talk about what I talked about in that room. So I'm like, man, maybe I got something here. Maybe I can give back and start getting some of those red checks off my name and maybe make it to heaven one day. And it got to a place where I kind of became like overdid the recovery guy deal. And then I ended up relapsing.
Mm.
And the amount of shame and fear and letdown that I felt from that was so like I didn't give myself grace like I gave everybody else. And so coming back from that, it was hard. It was like, who am I to share my story? Like, and so I had another opportunity when I got back out to speak at a big event for one of our news channels. And that's the time when I got up there. And I'm used to speaking to kids or to in rooms of recovery, at AA or at a rehab or something. And I walk in and I'm thinking it's gonna be like 30 people sitting in a circle holding hands type of deal. I walk in, it's like 200 suits and ties. The newscasters are up there. There's 40-foot big screen, and dude, I just froze up. And I had like a 40-minute spot, and I spoke for like 12 minutes, and I don't remember anything. And that was the day that this is in my second bout of recovery in this last time, back in it was probably 2010 when I started speaking again. And it was just like, dude, if I live in fear, if I let anxiety win, if I don't start facing all these things that I fear most, then the devil, whatever you want to call it, it's always going to have a foot in the door. And I want to make
Mhm.
damn sure he has nothing. There's no way that he fears me when I wake up. He hears my feet hit the floor. And so that's when, like, I got certified as a skydiver because I was pretty afraid of heights, and standing out of the window of a perfectly good airplane and launching yourself out with nobody attached to you is kind of a freaky thing to do. And it was just like, what now? What now? What now? And public speaking was just such a fear of mine. But I saw the result it had with people. And then I saw the result it had with the kids, and that was like a game over. It's not even about me anymore. I've spoke to over 20,000 people per year for like the last 3 years in a row. It doesn't matter. Every single time I'm getting like 20 minutes out from the speech, and that little devil pops up. He's like, "You're an idiot. Nobody cares. Turn around. Why do you keep booking these events?" And I'm like halfway turning around, turning the car around. I'm like, "No, you got to get there." It's like, I guess when I stop fearing it, then maybe it's time for me to move on, you know?
It Yeah, you know what? I can still get that same thing when I'm speaking. I got my signature speech. I'm talking and I'm looking at these kids as I'm talking. I'm like, sometimes I get that. It's like, oh, they don't care about your stuff. They don't think that's funny as I'm talking. It's crazy. It's like, can you do two things
Yeah.
at once? Yes, I can say my speech and I can think that I'm not doing a good job. But hey,
Yeah.
you know what? I like what you said there. And I've heard that a lot. If I don't, I think I heard that from Brendan Bouchard too. He's like, if I still get nervous, and if you don't get nervous, maybe it's time to do something else.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. I think it's just one of those deals that, like I said, we've tried a lot of avenues that don't work, and we should probably share that with people.
absolutely. Yeah. I want to go. I want to go really far back, um, because that surprised me. That really caught me off guard. Uh, when you said you had suicidal ideation in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Now that's a young age.
Well, it was in third grade. When kindergarten's when I first started just getting bullied and all that.
Okay,
And
bully.
and
Sorry.
yeah, so third grade was really when I was like, man, and back in the 80s, we didn't I didn't even know that you could kill yourself. Like, we didn't have all the social media. You never heard about that. And I just knew I didn't want to be around. And I knew that from what people said, that they would probably be happier if I wasn't around.
Wow.
And that's when I really just started fighting back, and kind of becoming a bully myself. That was the worst part of the story is, you become what you hate most.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you think of a little kid, you think of your kid that age, what is that, 9 years old? And like, you should be playing with toys. You shouldn't think about it in your life. And there's people, places, and things that are built different, and we don't have that happy. And it wasn't from a bad home life. It wasn't from, I just, I didn't feel good inside. And I think my parents, they did the best with what they knew, and they wanted to kind of take the pain away. So they protected me, and they didn't sit me down and be like, yo, you're going to have to deal with this stuff sooner or later. And it's probably be easier if we deal with it now.
Mhm.
You protect somebody, they get used to the protection. Then we learn how to manipulate. Then we learn how to use it to our advantage. And, it kind of became a get out of jail free card, like, for a long time. Like, I have depression. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do it. And I got really good at that. And, which just made me sicker and sicker and sicker. And yeah,
Well, when you
nothing.
start saying I have depression, you're basically affirming it, right? You say I am, right? You
Mhm.
know those I am statements that,
Yeah.
just we label ourselves and then it starts to build those blocks up until you turn that thought into belief, then that belief becomes your truth and that truth controls your actions. I was the same way as you as a kid, man. I didn't have a bad my parents split up when I was 8 years old, but, I they both loved me, they treated me well, I played sports, but I remember I was stabbing a bed one time with a knife, a pocket knife, and I hit myself. I nicked myself in the thumb, and my mom's like, "What happened?" I'm like, "Oh, I was trying to kill myself." I didn't know what those words were, right? But they took me to see a specialist, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, he's fine," right? But from a very young age, I didn't like myself, and I didn't know that. I was always judging myself, comparing myself to other people at a very young age, and then that's when that hate started to come in and leads to becoming a people pleaser. And then
Yeah.
you start to do that your whole life because, when you make somebody laugh, it just makes you feel good. So you want that, you crave that. You go home, you look in the mirror, you don't like yourself. What do? You go out and you make somebody else laugh, makes you feel good about yourself, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just like that endless cycle. Um, One thing that I wanted to talk about was, you said you got bullied, and I want you to tell us what you would say to a kid or a parent that has a kid being bullied. But you said your teachers were even picking on you.
Yeah. So,
That's crazy.
again, how old are you?
I'm 38. I'll be 39 in January.
So you're right, you're not too far behind, but it was starting to change a little bit then, but yeah, so, I mean, our teachers would hit us on the knuckles with rulers and sit us in the back, make fun of us in front of the class, put a bar of soap I had a bar of lava soap in my mouth half the time for saying, swearing I was a mouthy little dude, so my kindergarten teacher really set the precedence for me, constantly pointing out the fact I couldn't sit still and that I was different than all the other kids, and they would laugh at me. And obviously, if the teacher's doing it, they'd go out and they'd say the same things to me on the playground, and I'm just freaking drowning. And that just made me hate authority. It made me want to be wanted by the wrong people. It's just a lot. Your first year in an organized school and trying to figure it out, and just that's the initial experience. It was kind of from there just went to survival mode. It's like putting my armor on every day to go to battle and not to go to learn.
Yeah,
It's
those
like, all right,
those teachers and parents, as a kid, they're supposed to be there to protect you. And when you look up and you see those protectors picking on you or making you feel vulnerable, it's like, who can you trust, right? You start to lose
yeah,
trust. I was fortunate. I was picked on a bit in junior high, because I was small. I was a late bloomer, but it was like my friend group picking on me, right? But I was a little flamboyant sometimes. But one of the things that stuck out for me was my nickname was Gay, and back 24 years ago, that was like a bad thing, right? It was looked at as a bad thing, and I don't think that way now, like definitely not. But I thought there was something wrong with me just because, and then I was scared just because of that nickname.
yeah,
And it made me just go down this whirlwind of, okay, am I not normal? And things that can, even though people weren't, I don't think they were doing it to really, really be mean and hurt me. It was guys picking on guys, right? But it really
yeah,
stuck in, and it did hurt me. And I actually wrote about it in my book because I didn't realize how much of the impact it actually had on me in my life.
yeah, yeah. That's, I think, one thing going through my book, like writing it down. Like, you do the work to get into recovery, you do the steps. I don't know what you've done in yours, but you really peel back the layers of revisiting all the stories,
Oh,
man. There's a lot of healing to do. This last year and a half was a roller coaster, man. There was times I was like, I am not putting this on paper. And then the other side of me is like, you have to put this on paper. If you're not willing to do it, nobody else is gonna be willing to do it. And just this roller coaster of emotions and fears. And it's a lot of that inner child stuff that happened freaking 35 years ago. Man, I'll tell you the story. I was a dick. And, by the time I was in junior high, I was fighting a lot and I was a real jerk to a lot of people in high school because that was my defense mechanism. Like, if
mhm.
I'm meaner or scarier than they are, nobody's going to want to fight me. And that'll keep me safe. which, like I said before, I ultimately became what I hated most was the bully. And I spent my 20-year high school reunion walking around apologizing to people. Like, hey, I feel really bad about the way I treated you in high school. And it was insane how these grown men and women, you could almost see him like morph back into that high school age kid and was like, that means a lot to me. Like something I did, somebody's been carrying for the last 20 freaking years. Like,
Mhm.
not okay. So when I think about that, who some of those that don't get in recovery and don't stop hurting people, it's like the scars we're leaving, the holes we poke, it's like we got to do better. So that's one thing I work with the youth really hard on. Like, man, life's gonna kick our butt. We don't need bullies to do that. Like, we need to fight against life, and to try and lift people up and make dang sure my kid isn't gonna do it. But what I tell people who, if your kid's getting bullied, for me, and this may not be a popular thing, but if my kid asks your kid to stop and they don't stop, then my daughter's gonna sock you in your mouth. And she knows jujitsu and she can box and she's a sweetheart. She'll help you back up. But there's a certain point where you push and push and push and push, and that's when people break.
Mhm.
That's when people don't wake up the next day. That's when people jump out in front of cars. That's when, and I'm not okay with that. I'd rather have a fist fight and let them figure it out than some kid, boy or girl, hold on to so much emotional trauma that they end up taking their life. Like, that's not okay. And if I'm happy to help whoever get more help that they need, and most of the time we find that if there's a bully, there's a reason for the bullying, whether he's getting it from mom or dad at home or big brother or whatever. It's just a chain, it's passed down traumas, and we got to get better.
Yeah,
As a
generational
community,
trauma.
we got to get better.
What would you
So,
say to parents to teach their kids on to not be bullies, or if they see somebody bullying somebody else?
for me, you can't bully a self-confident person. Bullies usually pick out the weakest link. Sometimes not, but in general, it's like if you give your kid, like, there's a lot of these shows that have come out and empowering their kids, telling them they're beautiful, you're great, you're this, you're that. That's all good and dandy, but if the kid doesn't believe it, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
So for me, it's giving my daughter or youth opportunity to become proud of themselves, and that usually comes through doing hard things.
Mhm.
So whether that be entering an art contest that they were afraid to do, or singing on stage, or learning a new sport, or building something, or cleaning their room, or making their own sandwich once they can hold a knife properly and not hurt themselves. It's like I let my daughter from a very young age, well, one, because I was lazy and I didn't want to do it, but she made the worst peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but she was so freaking proud, and she made like six more and just ate them because she made her first sandwiches. And it was like she never asked me to make her sandwich again. I was like, yes, okay, does this work with cleaning your room? It's
Mhm.
like preparing them for the real world, not protecting them from it. I had big ears, my ears stuck out. So in sixth grade, my parents got to the point where they're like, adults were bullying me for my ears sticking out, calling me Dumbo and all these things. So they went and got me surgery, but it was like that was 10 years too late. I'd already
Mhm.
been conditioned from kindergarten to sixth grade to know that I was ugly and I was stupid and I had bad ears. So it didn't matter what you did. The damage was done. So I think it's like really finding one, making the kid, if your kid's a strong, like confident kid, to teach the other kids and to be an asset to the kids that aren't in their school. So we have something called Hope Squad in our schools,
Okay.
and it's kids that are trained to recognize the body language and stand up and help these kids get the help they need. They're not the help. They refer them to the help. But there's these little armies of mental health warriors walking through the hallways. I'm like, that's super cool. So I go and I work with those guys, but really it's the things you can't take. I can take my kid's phone. I can take your kid's phone. I can take your car. I can take your clothes. I can take your house. But everything that you learn to gain all those things, I can't take. The intangibles, it's the being able for knowing that your kid, if you were to be leave them in the woods, that they would be confident finding their way out.
Mhm.
So, we go dirt biking, we go rock climbing. I'd show her how to shoot guns and how to load guns and how to properly, like, just anything that a boy could possibly manipulate her with, she's gonna do it better than he is. We're bareback horses. She can change a tire on a car. Like, I've just tried to find obviously age appropriate, but it's like,
Preparation.
where do you yeah, where do you get your confidence from? It's like all the things that we did wrong that we know doesn't work. Like, I know that, I'm confident in that. I'm not going that way with you, you know? So, I think it's just really giving them an opportunity to step into their own self.
Mhm.
But if mom and dad swoop in all the time and save them, they're just little wounded bird that
Yeah,
don't clip wings.
it's being honest with them, right? You
Yeah.
don't build them up for build them up and give them that false confidence that, I got when I used substances, right?
Mhm.
My son came to me and, he's playing baseball and he could get on after he listened to me and choked up on the bat because he's not strong enough. He finally listened to me and he basically got on base every single time after that. And but he never wanted to go out and play catch or learn how to field the ball. So he's like, "Dad, I'm getting pretty good. Hey," I'm like, "At batting? What do you mean? I'm good at baseball." I'm like, "At batting? Like,
Yeah.
you're really
Some
good.
work
You
to
can get
do.
on the base. You're really good at getting on the base. But do you know where to throw the ball when it comes to you? No. Well, there you go. And I don't want to, because he will be a good baseball player if he goes out and does the work. But yeah, he was a good batter. So I didn't want to, give him that. It's good to give him the confidence. Yeah, you're a good batter, but I didn't want to, hype him up with stuff that he's not that he needs to work on. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's just I think a lot of people are afraid to share their fails with their kids too, in fear of, like, we wanna be I don't wanna be perfect in my kids' eyes, so they have this unrealistic expectation of what they need to be for me, but
Mhm.
also a lot of people don't wanna share, like, if you were a drug addict or if you drink or smoke or had sex when you were younger and all these things that we don't want for our kids. But if we don't educate them on that, somebody else is going to educate them on that. And it's
Mhm.
probably going to be their first boyfriend or girlfriend or some app. It's like, no, I'm going to be the teacher on that one,
Yeah,
you
fair
know?
enough. Hey,
So,
the phone's the teacher now. Hey.
yeah. So it's like you can choose, and there's a lot of, I don't know what it's like where you're at, but religion plays a big stronghold in a lot of places. Culture of community plays a lot of old school culture, and it comes down to we know what we know, and we can't parent like we were parented, and it's a whole other world. Like I didn't grow up with technology. I didn't have my own. I didn't have a cell phone. We had pagers, beeper. Go to a payphone and call back. What do you need? Like 30-minute event. And I had my first cell phone. You could call for like 6 minutes, and it'd get so hot you'd have to put it down for 30.
Mhm.
So these kids have grown up with a phone since day one, and we need to get used to that. And I think one thing that I've learned working with the youth is uh, that and it's been hard for me to learn because I'm not a big technology guy. It drives me nuts when kids play games all day long or on their phones all day long. But if your kid can communicate better via text message than face to face, I would much rather have you text them in another room and get out what they're really feeling than sit and bully them or force them into talking to you face to face and they crumble and then they learn to never talk to you. It's like that's one thing that there's a couple cases where if they would have just tweaked it a little bit, that their kid would still be around.
That's crazy. You know what? I've never heard that. If if your kid's better texter, put him in another room. And then he's not feeling the pressure of the face to face.
Yeah.
I like that. I've never heard that before. And
So we'll
it's
sit
what.
back to back so you're not no eye contact, which eventually we want you to have eye contact. We want you gotta get a job interview. You gotta be able to do, these things. But I want my kids now. And my wife has 3 young boys, and everybody's different. I was taught to shake hands, make eye contact, say what you're feeling, express yourself. But that's not the way these younger group kids are being brought up because everything's at the tip of their fingers. But they won't say 3 words to your face, but if they go and they text out this beautiful message on how they're really feeling, like, does it matter? Like, you can teach them later. They don't gotta be, you know, number 1 motivational speaker right off the bat, like, they're 5. Give them a chance.
Yeah, I like that.
You know? So, it's like, whether they're 16, I'd rather know how my kid feels and that they trust me enough to come to me than to fear me,
Hmm.
and I've had to work on that one because 'cause I'm
Yeah.
visually pretty scary.
Yeah, tattooed up, physically fit. It's funny that the first my first three guests that I've had now, you're the third, are extremely physically fit, like really fit. And it goes to show you, and they've all my first one struggled with substance use. Now he's a personal trainer, life coach, business coach. Second one, he lost his mom to um, a substance misuse, but he's
Yeah,
physically fit. He's a personal trainer, and I didn't plan this out. It's just guys that I found that are in the space that realize the importance of physical fitness and your
yeah,
mental health.
yeah. I think that's and and you'll find that people abuse that as well in the
Hmm.
mental health space. They're chasing that you can get fit as you want, but if you don't do the work, you're still gonna hate what you see in the mirror. So
Yeah.
that's a big thing where I use it as a tool. I use the gym so that I perform well at the things I love to do, like jujitsu or ride my dirt bike or rock climb or, whatever it is. And quality of life long term is important to me. But if I didn't have like beating myself up, like running or lifting heavy weight or whatever, like that's where I go first to blow off steam to where I can actually make sense of what's going on.
Yeah.
So, you can't run away from a bad attitude, and, that's just one of those things that eventually you're gonna have to. So I've got this tattoo, says,
Hmm.
"It's better to stand and fight. If you run, you will only die tired."
Fair enough.
And I ran from everything growing up, and eventually it almost killed me, and now as things come, I deal with it. I don't leave anything until tomorrow, unless it's maybe, like, mowing the lawn or something. But emotionally, I gotta deal with it today, and it
Yeah.
might be in 10 minutes, but and I think in a relationship too, my wife she's more of a thinker, needs to have a minute to process, and I'm like, "Let's talk about it right now." So, I'm learning to, budge a little
Hmm.
and compromise and, constantly growing, and I think that's the if you get set in your recovery ways, eventually, you're gonna wear that tool out, and it's gonna stop working, and you're gonna get complacent. So I do a lot of, like breathe. I have a breathing coach that we do guided meditation, Wim Hof breathing, followed by an ice bath. I do Indian sweat lodges. I go to church sometimes. I go sit quietly in the mountains. I work out. That I don't. I want to have so many hobbies that I can't overdo any of them, and that way I feel pretty safe.
No, I like that. I'm glad that you said you use working out as a tool because I got addicted to working out. I was going 6, 7 days a week trying to get bigger. I got in fear of if I don't go, I'm gonna lose it. And then I started to realize that no matter how big, I'm 235, and I started to realize that no matter how big I got, I still saw that skinny little kid.
Yeah.
And so then I had to revisit that again. And I just had to
Mhm.
talk my way through that. Like, okay, I had to challenge that. Is this true, Justin? And why do
Yeah.
you see that? Right? Because I had that belief that I was still that skinny little kid because I didn't hit puberty till grade 11. And I graduated, I think, at 175, but I was still 6'1. Um, but I was still skinnier. But I
Yeah.
still saw that little kid because I didn't heal that little kid. A lot
Yeah.
of people say you gotta you gotta kill the old you to build the new you. And I'm like, you know what? You don't have to kill the old you gotta heal the old you. You gotta understand the old you. You gotta fix the old you. You
Yeah.
don't have to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to befriend the inner child and those inner demons. And I think that's a constant process. I
Mhm.
think that I call it the floodgates. When people start seeing that pink cloud, they're feeling so good, and then they come to me just like, "I had the worst day ever." They've just been on cloud 9, and all of a sudden I'm all, "Yep, the floodgates." It's like you're ready for more. So so tell me all the bad things you just said about yourself. Like, write those down and, assess the problem here.
Yeah.
It's like if you quit being the student, like I've coached wrestling, volleyball, football for the last decade in the schools and stuff, and I've learned more as a coach than I ever did as a student. And it's been a cool experience to like humble up enough to know that I don't know anything. It's like the more clean time I got, the more I didn't know shit. It's like
Mhm.
I love the guys in the A that get the 1 year chip and they have it all figured out and they're gonna tell you exactly what you need to do. And then you got the 10-year guy going like, "Man, I still don't know nothing, and I'm gonna keep it that way. I'm gonna stay humble. Thank you."
That's funny you say
I'm
that
gonna
because
go with that guy.
I still learn from my clients when I coach them. I'm like, holy cow, I learned from you as well. And what I wrote in my book is there's one thing I know, and it's that I know nothing. And I'm going to
Mhm.
live like that because once you think you know everything, you're going to go into stuff thinking you know everything, and then you're not going to learn. So at the beginning of my keynote speech, I ask people, I invite them to be a student, of whatever their thoughts or feelings and what resonates with them, right? Because if you go in thinking you know everything, you're gonna miss a nugget, right? And if you just take one thing out of everything you learn, one keynote speech, one book, you read a whole 300-page book, you get one thing out of it, you're still learning something.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
uh,
I like that.
I just have some questions, a couple questions I want to end up with. What is What is something that you would say to your younger self? Since, you started off at a young age, what is one thing that you would say to your younger self?
Man, I would say figure out who and what you wanna be and work really hard on that, not care about what everybody else is doing because you'll never be the best copycat. I think we're all given a certain genius, if you will. We're not all gonna be great at math. We're not all gonna be popular. We're not all gonna be good at sports, but you're gonna be a guru at something.
Mhm.
We have our kids spending all this time on math, science, English, all this crap. How much time do we make them spend studying themselves? It's like, man, we're missing a huge piece to because if we're not good, our grades aren't going to be good, or we're not going to live into our true potential. So I would tell that little dude that you're going to be all right and that you're going to bring some great things to this planet. And the sooner you can fly your flag and be your true self, the sooner you'll find your real friends.
I love it. What does the phrase "man up" mean to you? How do you feel about that?
Man up back when I was growing up means a lot different than it does right now. Um, man up for me, some people take that as a negative or whatever, but I think it can be taken anywhere. And I'm kind of a tough guy in the sense that manning up is like kind of like my tattoo. It's better to stand a fight. You're not going to win every battle, but you need to fight every battle. And for me, it was like I used to get in fit. Man, I had 100 street fights before I even graduated high school. And I got into cage fighting at 35 years old off of Facebook because I wanted to hurt people. I was angry and I wanted to become this badass. So I started training. And what I thought was going to happen is I'm going to develop all these skills. I'm going to be able to kick people's asses. And what really happened was I learned honor and discipline and anger management and to identify bad situations and walk away from them, not run into the fire. And so it's just been this wild experience. So manning up for me is sometimes shutting up, sometimes
Mhm.
stepping back, sometimes understanding that I don't need to be right. And I had to be, I joke and say, before Google, you had me. I had all the answers. I just make shit up. It sounded good saying it, So, you know, just being a man to me is understanding my feminine and my masculine side and finding a good balance.
I like that. That's a great answer. And last one, what does resilience mean to you?
Resilience for me is you win or you learn. The only way you lose is by not trying, and I think just showing up every day, no matter what happened the day before, giving yourself grace, taking notes on what went well and what didn't. I think people do a lot of good things, and then one thing goes bad, and everything's a disaster. It's like, man, you just killed it. You had one step that was wrong. Revamp that and keep going. So I think just get up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward.
Awesome. Okay. What do you want to say about your book? You got this book coming out.
Dude, it's gonna be amazing. So it's called Warrior in the Garden. It drops on September 27th. It'll be $1.99 on Amazon for the first 24 hours. It is a roller coaster ride. All my beta readers and testers, they said they couldn't put the book down. They cried, they laughed, and said that they could identify with a lot of it. And it's coming from I had the youngest one was 10 years old, the oldest one was almost 80, and everybody had the same result. It either hit their inner child or it hit them where they're dealing with those things in school. So I had a wild ride, and I really went all in and just super vulnerable on this book, and, I think it's gonna help a lot of people. If not, it'll give you a good, roller coaster ride of reading, so I'm excited. Warrior in the Garden, it'll be out. I'm working on the Audible. I just got, as you can tell, I got a cold, so I can't record. It's got to be all the same
Yeah.
magical reading. Man, it's hard, way harder than I thought it would be.
Oh,
So
really?
that'll come out, and then the paperback will come out. But I'll have a link. You're in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll have a link for Canada. I'd love for you to share that out to all your people. But yeah, it's been an amazing growth experience. Um, I can't even explain it, and I'm sure you went through the same thing, like, "I'm gonna put this stuff out there, like, I could be
Yeah.
judged." It's funny how we put all these things in the book that we never wanted anybody to know, that they might not like us, and then we go and we be real and people like us. It's like,
Hmm.
"Man, I wish I would've known that when I was 6." So, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm excited. I appreciate you having me do this and shouting my book out, and
For sure. This episode's gonna drop on the day that your book comes out.
let's do it.
We're gonna make sure that it
Perfect.
comes
So
out there.
today, buy
Yep,
my book,
today the book is
Amazon.
out, September
So
27th.
also make sure they look that you buy it on the link, so you won't get lost. It'll register that way. So, and I'll send you all those links.
Cool. Where else can people find you?
Oh, I'm most active on Instagram at Tattooed Life Coach and the number 8, and Facebook is Rob Eastman, and then my website is robeastmancoaching.com.
Well, there you have it. Thanks for coming on the show, Rob. It's been a pleasure listening to your story, listening to your journey. You dropped a ton of information, knowledge. You got really vulnerable, and I really appreciate that. I'm sure the listeners will appreciate that. Heal that inner child. If I could take anything away from this, it's heal that inner child, but also have those important discussions with your kids about bullying, about you know, talk, telling the truth, talking about
Yeah,
their feelings. And the one thing I really learned was that if your child has a hard time having a conversation with you, you know, let them text you from another room, sit back to
yeah,
back. I like that. Hey, they're not going to be motivational speakers like you said overnight. So do what you can to get through to your kids. It's very important. I'd also like to thank everyone who stopped by to listen to my incredible guest today, Mr. Eastman, share his amazing story. Please be sure to check him out, give him a follow, and let them know how they impacted you. I'm pretty sure if you reached out to this guy, he would message you right back, let him know what you thought. You could work with him. You could do his training, life coaching. He's done it all. I'm going to put all his contact information in the show notes so you can find him. And if you liked this podcast episode, be sure to like, comment, or share it on your platform so we can help spread that message. This is the Stronger You Project. Thank you for coming, Rob.
love it, man. Appreciate you.